Actually born in Monmouthshire, which is the kind of Liechtenstein of the United Kingdom in those days, before it was formally annexed by Wales in the infamous Edward Heath reforms of local government in the 1970s. And the village I was born in has a French name, Fleur de Lis. I spent all my early years in Wales and I got 2 Scottish names. So that makes me totally impartial. And the way we're going to play this is I'm going to ask Paul to start on behalf of the campaign for an English Parliament and just have 5 minutes or so to set out his stall, and then I'm going to ask John to do exactly the same thing for the United We Stand, and then I'm going to ask at the end Eddie and Warwick to sum up for each side, and the meat and the sandwich will be your good selves, because then you'll have the opportunity to sound off and give your own views or ask questions of anybody that you want. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask our Deputy Leader, Paul Nuttall, MEP, to set out his views on the campaign for an English Parliament.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks, Neil. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is I just think it's healthy that a political party can have a debate like this. Other political parties wouldn't do this. It's grown up, it's all going to be friendly, there's going to be no falling out. In fact, John and I were laughing about it on the Eurostar the other day. And it's just healthy debate, because healthy debate moves policy forward. And it's only by having these debates will we grow into being a mature, respectable, forward-thinking party. Now, I'm a unionist. I believe in the union. It's a union that we should cherish. It's a union that's brought us peace, prosperity, democracy for nearly 300 years. And it's a union worth saving. But at the moment, it's under attack. And it's been under attack since 1998, because the devolution genie was let out of the bottle. I didn't want devolution to happen, but we are where we are. And times are changing, and we've got to change with them. We have a situation now where the Scottish, the Welsh and the Northern Irish have their own parliaments or assemblies. They can vote on their own non-devolved issues. The English have nothing. We have a democratic deficit within these isles at the moment. And it's unfair to the English. And resentment is growing. Latest opinion polls are now showing that the English would like to see Scotland cut adrift altogether. They wouldn't mind Scottish independence because they're fed up with tuition fees, they're fed up with the fact that prescription charges are free in Scotland, yet the English have to pay. They're fed up with the fact that the English are handing money hand over fist to Scotland in particular, but also Wales and Northern Ireland, but particularly Scotland, and it's beginning to grind. Something has to be done, and a political party has to take the lead on this issue, because the other parties are burying their heads in the sand. And if we do nothing, then the union that we love will break, and it will break within the next 10 to 15 years. And I want us to be radical on this issue. I want us to be forward-thinking. I want us to have a policy for the 21st century, not one for the 20th century. The way we do it is we need an English Parliament, because the English people need to have the right that is offered to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. We need a democratic, level playing field. Now, it makes sense to have an English Parliament. We're not doing the bidding of the EU. You might be told that. We're doing exactly the opposite, because the EU wants to break England into regions. What I propose is we have an English Parliament which is elected on a county basis, and we do away with Euro regions altogether, because the EU fears nothing more than an English identity. The EU would fear nothing more than an English Parliament, which would pay all together to the idea of Euro regions. We also have a situation whereby the House of Lords will go soon enough. We will have a democratically elected second chamber. And wouldn't it make sense? Wouldn't it make sense to make that democratically elected second chamber a union parliament that would hold the union together, that would deal with non-devolved issues such as foreign policy and defence? And that could be elected on an existing constituency basis. We need to do something. Our former policy that we had, that we would do away with the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Assembly, the Northern Ireland Assembly, and do away with MSPs and MLAs, It's total fantasy.
Because nobody wants it. There is not one single member elected to the Welsh Assembly, the Scottish Parliament or the Northern Ireland Assembly who stood on a platform of doing away with those assemblies. Not one single person. There is no appetite out there. You could not say to the people in Northern Ireland, we want to do away with your assembly. There would be uproar. We realised that when we were on the doors campaigning last year. There is no appetite in Scotland. Indeed, in Wales, they voted in March last year to increase powers to the Welsh Assembly, not do away with it. We need to move with the times. We can't bury our heads in the sand. We can't go back to an old policy where we're banging our heads against the brick wall and we're getting 2–3% in elections. We need to change, because if we don't change, we'll be left behind. And one of the main political parties, Labour, the Lib Dems or the Conservatives, will go for a policy like this, and they will go for a policy like this within the next 2 to 3 years. So we've got a choice. We can either lead on this issue,
like we've led on wind farms, like we led on immigration, and let the other political parties catch us up, or we can follow in their wake. And I suggest to you that we should be radical. We should think outside the box. We should look into this century, not look back into the last. This, in my opinion, is new UKIP. This is radical UKIP. This is the UKIP which has evolved and developed over the past couple of years. I think what this policy, a union for the future, is a policy to hold the union together. A federal UK is the future for the union, and I put it to you that this is a sensible policy and it will garner massive amounts of votes for UKIP right across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for that robust exposition. And now for an equally robust exposition on the other side, I'll ask John Bufton, MEP.
Thank you, Neil. I'd like to start off, ladies and gentlemen, by sort of continuing with the sentiment that Paul kicked off with at the beginning. This is not about an anti-UKIP issue or anything like that, or an anti-Paul and I issue. You know, we do need to discuss these things out in the open. Paul and I are good friends. We sit together, so it's nothing at all that's personal with this at all. So I can be very clear on that, because I know quite often we're accused that there's a lot of infighting within the party. Well, it's not infighting. This is about having a debate. And from my point of view, and I'll be clear in a second about why I believe that Paul is wrong in his argument, but I really believe that it's down to the members of UKIP to have their say. At the end of the day, it's your party, it's not our party, it's your party. So the members really must have a say in what's going on. Now, I'll start off with Wales, and I won't mention the rugby at all, although I know it's, we had a good result last weekend. But just to let you all know that as far as Welsh Assembly was concerned, only 25.4% of people voted for it. That's all that voted in the yes side back in '97 for the Welsh Assembly. So there's a huge amount of people in Wales that are opposed to the actual Assembly itself. Now, I understand, of course I understand, the grievances that many English people see when you look at the fact that Scottish MPs come down from Scotland, they're actually in Westminster discussing English matters, and the same applies with Welsh MPs as well. When they come down, the same thing goes on. Of course I understand that, and that's a big grievance. But if I can just go on to a few things that are happening in Wales as we speak. We have a health service in Wales which is far worse than the one in England. We may have free car parking charges, we may have free prescription charges, but the care that we're getting in Wales is far poorer than what you receive in England, and that is a fact. Education in Wales, we've got a system called the PISA tables. We're the worst nation in the UK with those results because of devolution. So our school children are struggling because of that. That's just two factors. The ambulance service in Wales, we have got the worst ambulance service in the UK. Response times are very poor. So before people get the idea that we've got a really good thing in Wales, that's not true at all. Now, my situation started with this several years ago because I was involved with the initial policy. We had a problem because at the time they were looking at policies and so forth, and with the Assembly elections we needed to see exactly what our policy was. So the formula that we've had for many years now, to me, has worked quite well. We have a situation where we believe that we want to scrap these assemblies, get rid of the members, a whole tier of politicians would come out. So your MSPs would go, your AMs would go, and your MLAs would go. So all of a sudden you made that big saving. You would then have English days in London, in Westminster. English days. You'd have English MPs discussing English matters. That to me is fair. You know, the same with Welsh MPs, they'd be back in Cardiff doing the same thing, same with the Scots and the same with the Irish. So there's not a problem there. To me it's perfect sense. Now, Paul mentioned a few things about, I'm just going to pick him up on a couple of points, and I'm sure you can come back with me later on. But the referendum that we had, Paul, last year, was very biased. The yes side, in fact, there was no official yes and no campaign. So it was an unofficial situation. All the money went into the one side, so we were against the establishment. That's what happened there. That's the first thing. You also mentioned that we didn't do very well in the assembly elections, or you were alluding to that, which I understand. In the sense you said that nobody wanted us because nobody was elected. The problem we had in the Welsh assembly election was that the policy would change. Nigel changed the policy. So the bottom line was our feet were taken from us. So all of a sudden we had a change of policy. So that was key, where we stood. I hope this afternoon we can have a debate now with plenty of questions, and I will answer the best I can. But at the end of the day, I'm asking Paul Nuttall, Deputy Leader, to give the members a ballot on this issue. Thank you.
Well, talk about your own to John for that. I'm now going to throw the meeting open to you to make any observations you want, or to ask any questions of either side as well. David Coburn. David Coburn.
I'm a unionist of my bootstraps, as you all know, and a Scotsman. I'm not very keen on the Scottish Parliament. I think it's a tremendous mistake, and I also think the Welsh Parliament was a tremendous mistake. It's Mr. Blair playing fast and loose with our constitution, which he didn't understand. But we are where we are. My problem with Paul's proposal is I think it might fire up English nationalism. If there is going to be any form of an English Parliament, I think it would be better or more credible if it was made up of English MPs meeting in perhaps Westminster Hall or one of the big committee rooms, and they do English business, but they are the existing members of Parliament, not new members of Parliament.
Yes.
This would solve the West Lothian question. It wouldn't cost any extra money, so that's what would concern most people. And this is why the Liberals basically wet their pants over this EV referendum. Nobody wanted that. They were more interested in their homes, their shops, and their businesses. And I'm serious worried that if we go with Paul's policy, it will look as if we're unrealistic, and we're basically crossing the road to pick a fight we don't need. So I would say if there's going to be an English Parliament, we have, obviously the constitutional things have gone on. Surely what we should do is have something that does not cost any more money. That's the only pragmatic solution. I think what Paul's suggesting is going to be a big problem. I'd like you to
I think, first of all, before we go any further, I think, well, let's establish one thing here. We do have a Scottish Parliament, we have a Welsh Assembly, and if we go to Northern Ireland, the same situation. Having just recently come back from the SNP, meeting with the SNP in Edinburgh, we are in a situation where the genie is out the bottle. It's been used that term many a time, but it's firmly there. Scottish nationalism is growing. The SNP are very arrogant in their approach to the Union, and actually turned around and said to me personally, we view England as a separate nation. Now I think we have to weigh that up. Now, if you want to save the Union, then we have to take action in regard to rebalancing the situation. Now that's something you have to weigh up when it comes down to the situation. Also had a meeting with Plaid Cymru, with Elwyn Thomas, looking at the new leadership coming up through the Welsh nationalism, and they are becoming more radical in their approach. They are following the SNP lead. Now that's sobering, because if you want to save the Union, we have to rebalance the Union. And we can only do that by re-engaging with a fair deal, an equal deal for the people of England.
We've got to have an English Parliament of some sort. But the idea is where, if we have it on days,
Speak up.
I think, sorry, we've got to have an English Parliament, and we've got to have it on more than just days. I think it's got to be on perhaps a week or 2 weeks at a time discussing the English questions. And at the end of the day, until we get it, we're still going to be downtrodden. I mean, and the chap at the back said about English nationalism coming up. What's wrong with being an English nationalist? There's nothing wrong with it.
If I can just answer that point, to be honest, well, 2 points really, one on the end to start with. The 1st of March, a few days ago, St David's Day, there was a referendum was taken in Wales, a poll by ICM for the BBC. Only 7% of people want independence in Wales, that's clear. 22% voted in the same ballot for the Assembly to be abolished. As far as I'm concerned, that 20% is our vote, because the other parties want to keep it, we don't. That's the first thing. Sir, what you're saying is, I can understand where you're coming from. What we had in the past was a week, so it would be a whole week of days that the English MPs would discuss only English matters to do with England. They would have the finances and support. They'd all get together as a union to discuss national interests, but that week, though it has to be a bit longer than a week, we'll look at that, but at the moment we feel it's a week. The same with Wales, because the Welsh MPs would come back and they would discuss it. That to me would be fair. But you're doing away with a complete and utter layer of politicians. That is key, because we're a party, it was mentioned this morning in conference, of smaller government. That's one way of doing it. You create an English Parliament, you're going to have another tier. But the point I have to make this is that you have the English Parliament, you are doing Barroso's job for it, because regionalisation...
Can I just come back on that, right, please?
First point, David, you said that my idea will actually stoke up English nationalism. I'm sorry, but English nationalism is being stoked up already because there is no balance to the union. That's what's stoking up English.
But our existing policies about balance.
Opinion polls don't lie. It's as simple as that. And if you look, I think there's been 19 opinion polls on the bounce now, which show that the English want their own representation. The fact that we don't have representation is what's stoking up English nationalism. And John, you're saying that we're doing Barroso's job for him. We're doing absolutely the opposite. Of course we are, because what we want is we want an English Parliament elected on a county basis. We do away with regions altogether. So we're not doing... The one thing that they fear is English identity. Yes. And we give an English Parliament, we give an English identity, and that's the one thing that the European Union and Barroso don't want.
For a long time now, sorry, I've been trying to get in. I'm from Northern Ireland. Yes, I do. I had my hand up and I've seen other people, their questions. I had my hand up too. Okay, fine. I'm from Northern Ireland. I ran in the local assembly elections. I just want to address to you, how do you see you're going to dismantle the Northern Ireland Assembly? How are you going to dismantle after we have gone 30 years of troubles and come out of that, a peace process to get us where we are? We have so-called MPs in Sinn Féin who do not even take their seats. So you tell me how you're going to dismantle that and take that voice away from the people.
Okay. If we carry on...
It's pie in the sky, I'm sorry.
No, okay. If we carry on the route that we're on, you're going to find that these institutions will have more powers and you'll have the break of the UK. Because what will happen is, once you've got the English Parliament set up, Wales will be looking perhaps in time to go their own way. Scotland will start to go their own way. You will have a situation...
So you're telling me you're giving Sinn Féin
Scotland will end up... Let's suppose in Scotland it's like they go full on. What will happen then is they will rejoin... If we leave the EU, they will join back. So you have a situation where England will be outside the EU, Scotland could be back in it. So it's going to be a complete mess.
Well, I know for Northern Ireland, we go down that route. You're doing the role of what obviously Sinn Féin and all are wanting to be doing all along and not taking their part within Westminster. We have come through 30 years of this, and I know the people in Northern Ireland will not have the Assembly taken over.
Madam, I respect that. But the point I'm making is that as we're going to go along now, we're going to end up with 4 separate nations. And we know where we are.
It's all right to have 3 though, and we just don't get our bit.
I know passionately you don't understand the policy, madam. But we've got to have a proper debate, and it's got to be held in proper order. That's the role of the chairman, otherwise I might not be sitting here, which you may think will be an improvement.
Option that we present is UKIP's old policy. It is one parliament for the whole of the UK, with the Welsh members legislating for Wales, the English members legislating for England, and the Scottish and Irish members legislating for their home nations, as a whole coming together to legislate on matters relating to the whole. Now, there can be no question of fairness so far as concerns a platform for withdrawing devolution, we had a platform on which we fought the last Welsh Assembly elections, and only a few days before the election, the policy that we had fought on for 10 years, we'd ploughed time, money, blood, sweat and tears into that policy, and it was changed on the whim of our policy maker and our party leader, only a few days before the election. And at the end, when the election was over, and the two members who were leading in the polls who would have been elected were not elected, I was approached by a Conservative Assembly member and said, I thank you so much for securing my position with your last minute change of policy. Now, there you go. This is our great policy. Fairness to all.
I think one of the most important things we have to all ask ourselves, and I'll come back to it over and over again, let's look at what we are. We are made up of countries united together. Now, everyone in this room, without a doubt, believes in the United Kingdom. But the United Kingdom is in absolute need of attention, and it's about to go. Let's not kid ourselves, we are in dire need of attention to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is made up of Scottish, Welsh, Northern Irish and English. They are nationalities that are based in social, geographic, traditional and language. Now the British identity is a political identity that glues it together. Now in doing so, once we acknowledge that, we have to have fairness across our nations to hold it together. We need to rebalance it. Denying that things have not moved on since 1998, frankly, and I mean this with all politeness, is foolish and eventually will fall away. The report I have in front of me is a Labour think tank report that says, and it's clear on it, that the English no longer trust the UK government to speak on their behalf. That is a dangerous sign that the United Kingdom is about to break.
I'm going to take a view now from the Federal Republic of Germany in the back row there.
Yes. When I first joined UKIP, I often saw people who told me, well, on Europe it's too late, you cannot leave any longer, you cannot do that and that. And now we have these people advocating for the breakup of our great nation with which we want two world wars. They tell us we should break up into little countries, into little own nations with no communication, no joint identity. They tell us that, and I say, why don't they tell us it's too late on Brussels? Why don't they join the Tory party and say, oh, we'll repatriate some post, do something, rather than advocating principle and pride and freedom. And I say, the last time we gave in Northern Ireland, and we created Stormont, and it was a free lunch for terrorists across the world. The IRA loved it, and I say no to Stormont, and I say no to the Scottish Parliament, and no to the Welsh Parliament. I say abolish Stormont, abolish the Welsh Parliament.
I know this is very Irish.
They are here negotiating because they were finished. We'd infiltrated them right to the top. Right to the second command.
This is exactly the trouble you're going to have if you go ahead with this. You can hear the trouble that you're going to have, guys.
I just want to see boners getting out of prison. A lot of people suffered a loss of loved ones and signed we're all unions. This gentleman says from 1990,
we all go in another room.
I'm going to take a vote here. Would we like this lady to sit down and let other people take up? Mike Natcher.
Mike Natcher, MEP West Midlands. UKIP believe in small government. We don't want multiple assemblies in different constituent parts of the United Kingdom, but we do need a fair voice from each constituent part of the United Kingdom. The original UKIP policy was one Westminster Parliament and breaking, as we've said, on the constituent days. They'll all break together, so the Welsh go to Wales, the Irish go to Ireland, and so on and so on. and they talk about their own individual matters on those particular days. I thought that was a good policy. I'm still in favour of that policy because it saves money and it loses a whole swathe of politicians that we don't want. I'm trying to make myself redundant as an MEP. I certainly don't want to swathe more across the United Kingdom.
It's been said, and the justification for this is that the devolution genie is out of the bottle, and it well and truly is. Yeah, we can't put it back. But what we had originally was a proposal that's just been reaffirmed over there, is not to take away these regional assemblies, but to staff them with Westminster MPs, not other. So it wouldn't do away with Stormont, it wouldn't do away with the Scottish Parliament, it would just change the people who sit in it.
Correct.
And I think that's a very good system.
I started very, very sceptical indeed about this policy. I had a lot of discussions with Paul about it. Now, it seems to me that the more I think about this, the more I think, first of all, the current policy cannot work in the long term because of the issues within Northern Ireland, because of Scotland. If you look at opinion polls for the Scottish referendum, you find that when the Devo Max option is on the table, Scotland voters seem to want that if they can possibly have it. If you try to start rolling anything at all back in Scotland, Scottish voters will vote for complete independence. Now it may be that in Wales, it may be that in Wales, that if you had this policy, that Welsh voters would not go for independence. I can understand that. But you have to have a policy that preserves the Union. Now, I didn't realise until very recently just how much of a threat exists to the Union. How there is a genuine chance that we could see the breakup of the Union. And that is what this policy proposal does. It avoids, it deals with the current UKIP policy that doesn't work. It avoids the situation where you would have to create an extra tier, an extra layer of politicians. It very cleverly avoids an extra layer of politicians. And to me, as a committed unionist, I would like nothing better than to be able to see the old UKIP policy work. But I come to the conclusion it can't be made to work, and therefore this is the equivalent of major surgery to the Union. The Union is dying. We need to do something drastic. This is something drastic which can save the Union. If we don't do it, the Union will be gone altogether.
What we need to do is, Alex Salmond's been doing speeches around England. Came down to Liverpool 2 weeks ago and clearly states, go and read it in the Liverpool Echo if you need proof of it, that he will support English regions. Well, actually, as an Englishman, I believe in one country, not regionalisation of my country. And I think all of us here would agree with that. Yes. Now, it has to be on a positive identity. What Alex Salmond is coming down to do is fuelling resentment in England. He's actively trying to make Scotland dominant within the United Kingdom, and you'll see England broken up into regional areas if you do not act soon on this. Now, Mike is wrong. I'm sorry to say it, he's very wrong. It is not more MPs. In fact, it's a cost saving, and we will actually make a very clear move on Europe in the fact that this is one country, and we will work together as united countries called the United Kingdom.
Chairman, just to answer a couple of points there, I'll start because Jonathan Arnold, has he gone or is he still here? He's left, okay, well I was going to answer some of the comments of Jonathan, who is quiet. Well, okay, well, Piggy, you just mentioned about cost. Let me explain to you now what the English Parliament, in my view, is going to cost us. In Wales next year, the estimated cost of running the Welsh Assembly, that's the Central Services and Administration, is £347.9 million. Once you set up an English Parliament, there's going to be a huge cost for that. It's an extra body, and it will lead them. But the main gripe that I have, I'm a member of UKIP, and it's the truth is in the title, UK Independence Party. If this goes forward, we'll have an English Parliament, and the whole thing is broken up. It'll be a very sad day for our party if that happens.
The reason why it won't be an extra layer of politicians is because what's contained in this is the idea that we do away, in effect, with the House of Lords. We are going to get a democratically elected House of Lords. Whether we like it or not, it's coming. So let's make it a union parliament
that deals with non-devolved issues. Therefore, you're not adding another layer altogether, because what happens is the House of Commons, in effect, becomes an English Parliament elected on a county basis. There is no extra layer. In fact, you will save money if you go down this line. I know this is the nuclear option. I know that this is radical. But I don't see any other alternative, because we can't go back to the existing policy, because quite frankly, people don't want it. And we're in this game now of politics to win votes, to get people elected.
Not at any cost. Not at any
That's
cost.
that's what politics is all about. The only way we're going to get out of the EU...
Not at any cost. Not at any cost, I understand the Conservatives.
Hang on. If we want to get out of the EU, we need to get UKIP people elected to the House of Commons. Yes? No, we do. Right? That makes up 85% of the UK for an English Parliament. We will be crackers not to go down this line. Absolutely crackers. And the old policy is unworkable, and it's been proven in elections over the years. We don't get anybody elected on this policy.
Donald Mackay's Scotland. This is the wrong battle. Right, the battle for the union's been fought in Scotland. This gentleman is mistaken. The majority of Scottish people do not want independence. Definitely not. And we don't have to go down the road of abolishing the Parliament, but frankly, with respect, UKIP should be channeling some of its resources into the feeble Scottish voice, the unionist voice in Scotland, which is shamefully weak. And the battle isn't about, if you come out with an English Parliament idea, the bottom line is that we've lost. We've lost the battle. Scotland within the UK. That's the biggie. And Scotland has to stay within the UK. And the majority of Scottish people, that's what they want.
I genuinely... No, what will happen is, and I genuinely believe this, Scotland won't vote for independence, because if we can't continue down this line, the English will kick you out. That's what will happen. No, what will happen is resentment is growing that strongly in England. Opinion polls are showing it. No, I'm not staring. What's staring it is the lack of democracy and the lack of the democratic deficit. That's what's staring it.
Salmon doesn't want a referendum, he's pushing it back to 2015.
We can't win.
I'm Charles Starr, I'm Vice Chairman of the Devolution branch. In May last year, in May last year, I actually stood for a different party. I've since joined UKIP. I've spoken to the board when I first joined. I stood on an English Parliament background. Based on that, and I was finding a lot of people didn't vote for me. They were disgusted by discrimination. Let's go into the discrimination against the English. I'm not saying it's deliberate, but at the moment, Scotland, free elderly care. In this country, it's like if you can only keep £32,000, you're forced to sell your house. Free prescription charges in Scotland. Free eye tests in Scotland. Free student fees in Scotland. In Wales, if you study in Wales, you get subsidised student fees, correct? You get free prescriptions. And this is the fact in England. We make up 2/3 of the population of the United Kingdom. And at the moment, the people of England are getting disgusted for the way we are being treated. And we're not having to go to Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland here. We're not calling for the unions to be split up.
Jim, if I can answer that. Because, like I said at the beginning, I understand the ill feeling and the issues in England and what's going on. And I mentioned how badly things are running in Wales. But once you have your English days, we have to look at the Barnett formula again and look at the funding side of it. And then you'd be in a situation, your MPs on your English days could then do those things for you. And then...
Watching television with the Labour Party, where I stood, watching the SNP want to victory. I stood with a senior Labour bloke who turned around to me and said, if we don't change our policy, we will lose out. We've lost that in Scotland, it's backfired on us, we've got to modernise as a party. And Labour councillors and a Labour MP sat with him saying yes and asking me for information on the English Parliament. And you mentioned that Labour Party vote.
They're going to go for it?
The Labour Party will jump on a bandwagon and get it. And we will be left behind again on 5%, 6%, and we will be seen to the public as a party that is backwards. That is a little fringe party competing with the BNP, the Green Party, English Democrats.
Can I say a quick word? This conversation is being dominated by several people. There have been people who have their answers all around this room. They're totally ignored. Please let them speak.
Yes. Well, Chairman can't call everybody at the same time. Because that's what we started off with earlier on, and that didn't work. Gentlemen.
Richard Lowe, Chester, but initially from Anglesey and Welsh speaker, and once was a candidate for the Welsh Assembly. The Welsh Assembly is rubbish. I think everyone here agrees on that. In its present format, Welsh Assembly cannot continue. That being said, it needs expanding, not abolishing. The Welsh Assembly needs to have a position where it has more powers, real powers. It needs to be able to raise taxes by itself. The English Parliament would allow all of this to happen. UKIP are a small government. We are bottom up. People want their own elected representatives in their area 24/7. They don't want to be an afterthought, which they would be for one day a week. The UKIP policy, where you have 4 different parliaments, where you have the Senate/House of Lords deciding over things like law and order, defence and so on, is what would work. It lets people have a real voice. People would then know who their representatives are. It's not going to have more politicians. The House of Lords would, in this proposal, be slashed in numbers. For that, everyone agrees. There'd be less people in the Commons, for starters, as well.
Fewer people.
Pardon?
Fewer people.
Less people, fewer people. More people, everyone else. And the thing which I don't really understand about the anti-English Parliament feel is that when you actually look at everything, people in Wales want some sort of parliament. They want some sort of assembly. They want to be able to rule themselves. I'm not advocating the breakup of the union, but at the same time, if the people of Wales want this, we want to be out of the EU. We demand a referendum. Why don't we give everyone in the UK the option to vote on something which matters to them every single day of their lives?
Piers Walker, I'm just wholly against this suggestion, and it's really for this reason. 85% of the people in the United Kingdom live in England, and I joined, as you all did, the UK Independence Party rather than the English Independence Party. And what is so wrong with this proposal, typified by the gentleman from the Midlands, who comes from an English Democrat background, is this. You look at what happens in Scotland and Wales and say, oh, look, they get cheaper dentures than we do, or they can go to school cheaper than we can, or whatever. But the point is, all the taxation is raised by Westminster, it's divvied up by Westminster. The Scots don't tax us, they can spend their own money. They need a parliament to do it instead of the Scottish office that they had before. Well, that's their business. They don't tax us. We decide how much they get. So I really don't see that we should have an extra parliament, or a new parliament, in this country, just because some people with thin skins can't put up without having rudeness directed at them by people like Alex Salmon. He's an irrelevance to us.
Yes. For an independent England, thank you very much for actually putting that across. Contrary to actually trying to save the union at all. Let's come back to the basics. The basics are we all believe in a democratic process. At the moment, we have Scottish MPs, Welsh MPs, and Northern voting on purely English matters. Now, actually, we get our taxation through our voting system. Now, at the present time, tuition fees were actually the only way they got through the UK Parliament was through Scottish votes. Now, that's unfair. And actually, every single report you read shows that the people of England are resentful of that situation. Now, that's not going to go away. You can live in denial on that, and you can say it's irrelevant. But the biggest concern I have is when you see Scotland speak, you see the reaction in Wales, and actually only about 3 weeks ago, Martin McGuinness came out and talked for the first time about the referendum for United Ireland. It being in 2016. That is the unravelling of the United Kingdom. And the next thing, the BBC contacted only about 2 weeks ago actually, talking about more power to Cornwall. We've got to rejoin England back up with a collective voice. Well, actually, you might smile at that. They've been floated out because it fits into the European model of breaking England completely up into regional areas with no collective voice. You're helping. Completely stopping that approach. England is not a region. It's a country.
My name's John Bailey. I'm Treasurer of Croydon Branch. Firstly to say that this suggestion of 4 letters, I'm afraid, is far too complicated, enormously complicated. But then I would like to agree with one thing Mr. Murphy said, that the enormous discontent within England. But I would say discontent is due essentially to the deindustrialisation of England, the destruction of the economy, particularly manufacturing industry in England, and that is what we need to do something about. No, and this will not answer, the Paul Little's suggestion will not answer that problem. That's all I wish to say.
That we are going to be like that, but let's not whether we break up or not.
Cliff Dixon, UKIP in England. Could you speak up, please? I joined UKIP because UKIP believes in small government and UKIP believes in democracy. At the moment, 3 parts of the United Kingdom have their own parliament and we don't. That's not equality. Small government, Paul's proposal suggests we're going to lose the House of Lords, it's going to happen. So what you're at, with the policy that's there at the moment that Paul's got on the table, we'll have less people making the rules. There'll be more equality across the Union. And what we've got to look at is Alex Salmond. It's not going to be Scotland that breaks the Union, and Alex Salmond knows it. That's why he's doing all these talks south of the border. What he wants to do is get the English so wound up, because the English are 85% of the Union. He wants to get us wound up, so that all of a sudden, the polls are starting to show it, the resentment's going up. That's not being fueled by any English nationalists, that's Alex Salmond being very, very clever, which is why he wants 2 years, which is why he wants 2 years before a referendum, because then he can stoke it. And once he gets the English annoyed, and we start turning around and saying, we're upset with this, we're not happy with this, Alex Salmond's going to be going, oh, look at that, look at the English, look what they're doing, look at all this anti-Scottish sentiment, and he'll use it as a wedge to break the Union. By giving England its own voice and its own parliament, we take away that issue. We take away the feeling of malcontent south of the border, and we take Alex Salmond
Jonathan Oaten from Herefordshire. My committee have asked me to come today because 12 of them, all 12 of them, are against the Paul Nuttall view, and they are so concerned that they are willing to leave the party if this is a policy that's put through. I didn't vote in that, but they have actually passed on their concerns. If we already have a radical policy when we go to the electorate, we're saying to the electorate, look, we're going to take you out of your government that you're in now in Europe, and we want to bring that government back down. That's quite a big ask of the electorate to trust us to bring that back to the UK. If we have another radical policy, when they then have to start determining what sort of government they're coming back to, I think it's going to split our vote more ways than we need to. They're not going to understand fully, as we vote in this room, the pros and cons of the 2 arguments, or perhaps a 3rd argument. So I think we will be confusing the electorate, and they, like this room, will be split as to whether they can vote for us or not. And that's why I think we should strike this idea of a change in the British Parliament until such time as we have got that control back to the British Parliament to then consider. Now, my view, which is different from both of yours, would be the 2-vote system. The Scottish have 2 votes. They have a Scottish Parliament to vote in. They vote in the Westminster Parliament. The Welsh have 2 votes. The Irish have 2 votes. There's Stormont and Westminster. Okay. Even the Iraqis have 2 votes because they have a polling booth in London. They have a polling booth in London, and they can to vote in the Iraqi elections. The only people that don't have 2 votes are the English. So why don't we just give them 2 votes? So in the Westminster elections, they have 2 voting slips, and they get their vote is worth twice as much as any of the other regions. Because at the end of the day, that 86% of English voters pay for the 100% of everybody else.
That's the break of the union.
Right in the back of the room.
I just wanted to say that I think the British people are crying out for a party of principle. and not a party of pragmatism. Yes. I think pragmatism actually is a form of corruption. Yes. So when did UKIP stop being a party of principle and start to frame its policy on the basis of what focus groups say in Scotland and Wales? We're a party of the United Kingdom. That is a fundamental principle, and we should be a party of principle.
So what I think I'm going to have to do now is to put a stop to questions and contributions from the floor, and then we can have 5 minutes from each side, because we'll have to get back to the conference hall quite soon. People won't have had lunch either. So we'll start with either Paul or Eddie to wind up.
First of all, I'd like to say to both on the side, it's fantastic to be able to talk and debate. You know, it's essential to real change and positive change. I believe you to be sincere, but I believe you to be sincerely wrong for what you say. And actually, I would say, because I know when I read through your policies that I personally can destroy that, because actually every constitutional expert will actually go back to your policy and break it down and say it won't work. Now actually, the only way we can sometimes move forward is by being honest. Yes, there are clear identities across the United Kingdom that wasn't there before, but they are there now. Englishness is growing, and it's growing at a rapid rate. Now what we want to do is hold it all together, hold the English into the UK as well. Labour has started producing reports. The IPPR report is well worth a read. The Conservatives are going to lose David Mondale, so they'll have no UK-based Conservatives in Scotland. Watch David Cameron snub Ruth Davidson in Scotland, and you'll realise they're actually going to put party over the union, because it's their way, and I've heard this personally, of actually keeping Labour out of power. Let's go to the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems are already looking at ways of financing research that supports the break-up of England into a regionalised way for Europe. Let's not kid ourselves, that is what they're doing. They'll be there before yourselves, holding the United Kingdom together, if you're not careful. When we look at the English, they need a political voice because they have lost the trust of the UK government. Every report shows that. Every report. And it is increasing monthly. It's not a slow-moving identity anymore. When we look at BBC, we know the BBC are against an English Parliament because they're all supporting regionalisation in England. Yet there's a BBC for Scotland and a BBC for Wales. That will break the union. When it comes to it, UKIP needs to make sure it leads in this area. It needs to reconnect with the voters in England. Now I will support that. We're a cross-party campaign. We speak to all the groups. We know what's going on. Now that's a choice clearly laid out in front of you. I ask you to embrace an English Parliament, an English government, a First Minister of England, because if you believe in democracy, that is your only choice.
I'll do my best to be short and as brief as I can, but there are a few things that need to be addressed. First of all, the gentleman in the corner talked about UKIP being a party of integrity. You cannot get higher integrity than this front bench, and I'll tell you why. Because we've got UKIP, and non-political. We brought someone in from outside, not even a UKIP member, perhaps not even a UKIP supporter, to speak to UKIP about the way forward. So think on that one for a little while. I think that the fact that Eddie Bowen is here shows a very refreshing attitude in the leadership of the UK Independence Party. I welcome him, I'm pleased to see him, I don't agree with him, and I'll tell you why I don't agree with him. You heard him say that regionalisation is not part of their policy. You heard Paul talk about dividing the nation, its government by counties. Call it a county, call it a region, call it what you like, it's still the Brussels preferred option. The major regions of the UK are England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales and London. We already have those 5 regional assemblies in place. If we go down the route that Paul has described, and we retain those 5, then we gain the keys. We are regionalised, we're divided, we will be conquered. There's no doubt about it. His policy will make the trough, the Westminster trough, wider, longer and deeper. There will be more room for more troughs, more snouts in that trough. When the Welsh Assembly came into being, I can't speak about the Scottish Assembly because I don't have the figures. When the Welsh Assembly came into being, we were told it would cost £170 million per year to run. Not to establish, because that was a great deal more, but to run it, it would cost 170. Next year, it will cost 3 times that much. Right? So in that short space of time, the running costs of the Welsh Assembly have trebled. We'll get rid of that. We'll cure that. We'll probably cure a similar ill in Scotland and in Ireland. We would place the governance of the 4 nations in its elected members of Parliament, members of the British Parliament who would meet in their home nations for part of the month and the remainder of the month. Not 1 day a week, not 1 day a week, as long as it took. And as long as it took to meet together to legislate on matters relating to the United Kingdom. That, to me, is the way forward. I'll conclude by saying we have a petition downstairs. If you agree with what I say, or if you agree with what Paul says, please ask the NEC for a petition of the members as to which way we need to go. We need a petition, we need a vote by the membership in the same way that we had for the PEP, which would have destroyed the party. We need a vote by the membership on this. We asked early on for our policy to be printed in the Independence. It was not considered important enough to put it in there. We were left out. And it's only because I've been a little bit underhanded, according to some members of the party, by approaching on our own behalf other members of the party throughout the country, that we've stirred up a little bit of interest, and we're here today. This gathering was a last-minute event. It was not squadded. It was not fixed 3 months ago as everything else was. We've brought this about by pressure. We would like to see the members of UKIP cast their opinion on which is the way forward. Do we go united we stand, or do we go divided we
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. We've had a lot of light, a lot of heat. The one thing I can guarantee is that this energy is renewable and will be renewed. And that the debate will continue. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you, John. Okay,